In episode 166 of the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, we meet with Dr. Robert McNutt and talk about making medical decisions. It's inevitable that you'll have to make significant medical decisions in your future. Are you doing it right? The show notes for this episode can be found at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/166. Have you decided you're ready to make a change? To reclaim your health and fitness? The 40 Plus Fitness podcast is here for you. I'm your host, Alan Meisner. I'm an NSAM certified personal trainer with a specialization in corrective exercise and fitness nutrition. Let me be your coach as you find your way on your health and fitness journey. All right, let's go. Dr. Robert McNutt is a philosopher and a doctor, and a decision-making expert. He spent his career learning how to make the best decisions, and now he helps patients make the best medical decisions for themselves. His book, Your Health, Your Decisions, gives you the tools to better manage your medical decisions. So let's meet Dr. McNutt. So Dr. McNutt, welcome to 40 Plus Fitness.
Oh, thank you, Alan. I'm glad to be here.
You know, when I saw your book and was going to go through it, I'm like, I want to read this book. And I would have read it even if I hadn't had an opportunity to get you on the show. Because, you know, the whole medical profession and, you know, these, I guess for lack of a better word, special interests that, you know, are looking to convince doctors and pharmacists and dentists and pretty much anyone who is going to be in the position of providing care. They're selling stuff, and their reps are showing up, and they're funding studies, and they're paying medical schools for them to do stuff. And I was really happy to see a book that kind of looks at the patient and says, you actually are the one with the power in this relationship. Take it and use it for your good, because that's what the medical profession is actually here to do. And so I really appreciate your mindset, because, you know, you'd said in the book, you didn't come into this thinking you would be a doctor. You were thinking you were going to be something entirely different, and you have a philosophy background. And so coming in as a philosopher and a doctor, I think really put you in a unique place to be actually what we probably need more of. They should probably actually just start recruiting from the philosophy department to get better doctors in there, because I really do think that you kind of brought the perfect storm of what I would want in my doctor.
Well, that's very kind. I had that kind of experience through my practice. I kind of thought I was coming into a profession. And to me, a profession is one in which you serve the interests of the patient. I could see no reason to have a medical business for me or for hospitals or for doctors. It was all for the patient. And I thought that was going to be my job. I thought that my job would be to inform patients, help them understand what the consequences of some of the choices would be, and help them through any tough decision they would ever have. I will admit, Alan, that I focused on medical illness because that's where I saw most of the decisions necessary, and less on health. But as I practice more and see people more, I realized that the ability to understand the quality of information, to be able to understand what the information means to your life, and the empowerment for you to make a choice is the only solution to getting back a profession of patient care, not medical care, but patient care. And whatever was in my background that got me to that point, I don't know. But I have to tell you, it's kind of a funny. I have a kind of funny sense, isn't it interesting? My philosophy is the patient matters and the patient should choose, and somehow people tell me that isn't that a radical view? I didn't understand that. I said no. The radical view is a rational view of the way that decisions are meted out, and I could also tell that whatever was going to happen in medical care was the accumulation of decisions made. And whoever's making decisions is the one that is going to define how the process of medical practice should go for their betterment. And so I'm an advocate for patients, But I'm more of an advocate for letting them understand the information.
And I don't want to make this political, but I do want to make kind of a statement. It's funny if you ask someone and they'll steer one side of this question or the other straight away, almost straight away, is should the woman have the right to choose an abortion? And that's a medical procedure. And many people will say, well, absolutely, it's their decision, their body. And there are other people that will say, well, no, there's that other life. But either rate, it boils down to there's a large percentage of people that just believe that the woman should make the decision because it's her body. And again, I think kind of going on that, and not that I'm going to be on either side of this issue, and I really don't want to get too far into it, but it just kind of strikes me that all of these other things that are going on with our health, why wouldn't we think those same terms of this is my body and I get to make the decisions?
It was interesting in medical school for me as I tell the story in the book of kind of my decision-making journey. I truly expected to learn about decisions and how to provide decisions. But instead, I found myself as a journeyman apprentice where I was told to just do it the way I do it, and your experience will lead you the right way. But I knew enough, maybe growing up on a farm and watching cornfields fail and not fail, that I knew that was way too simple. Experiences vary, and how could I know whether I was translating the right experience? So I think I was lucky that I kind of had an underlying sense that I was a scientist. And it's interesting you say that. I was just reading a debate about statins, and I know you want to talk about that later, and we'll get to it because I think it'll help the listeners get a sense of the different types of decisions that my book talks about. But there was it was a dichotomy. You were either the less is more group, so don't take all those meds, they don't do you any good. And there's the do anything that possibly may help group. And so you have a kind of a dichotomized decision-making rule, and that is just wrong. That is a wrong way to go about your medical decisions. And in my book, the medical decisions that I talk about as a first place to begin to get to grips with how to make a choice is a choice between options in which there are trade-offs between either one kind of quality of life versus another, or life and death, or length of life versus quality of life. And those things that happen to you are permanent. So you have to be the one that knows how you would feel. And one of the examples I use, maybe too much in the book, is on prostate cancer, because that was one which I saw an awful lot of people for consultation, because it's a remarkable trade-off. If you do one option like surgery, you may have a little better chance of not dying of prostate cancer in the future, but the trade-off is you may be impotent, or you may leak urine for the rest of your life. And no physician, no insurer, no government, no one can tell a patient or me how to make that kind of a trade-off, which leads to the philosophy. That's why patients must understand, must be given that information. We should come up as a profession of medicine with a very good and standardized way to communicate with people about the consequences what they will choose before they decide, not after they decide.
Yeah, and I do think that that prostate example is really good because it's there's now actually a good amount of data to help someone kind of put that together, but one person's answer is not going to be the other person, and I think you stated it really, really well when you said, okay, you had one patient come in and clearly, impotence was something that was quite frightening to him, and he did not want to take the risk that would happen. So he opted out of the surgery, but then would just follow up and keep doing the PSAs to kind of make sure that, he was okay going forward. He may change his decision 5-10 years down the line, but in a general sense, that first decision was to not do it. Whereas another person came in and he was already having those issues. So to him, it was an easier decision to go ahead and move forward with the surgery. So for a doctor to decide that surgery is always the right answer, well, he just hit 50-50, on what the patient really, really cared about. And so, I think it's just difficult when you start saying we want to, and we want to control medical costs to make sure that they're reasonable. So the doctor has to weigh the amount of time that he's going to invest in us, his willingness to go against standard of care, and really listen to the patient. And that's a lot of moving parts for a doctor to try to make a decision for someone else, because he's not going through the consequences, as you mentioned in the book, which I thought was huge.
Yeah, you're right on. You're very wise. You're very thoughtful about this. We can get into the health policy issues at the end. I tried to be very subtle about the health policy issues in the book because I realized that I was going to be facing an uphill battle. Even in my own patients, at times they would say, well, doctor, tell me what to do. You're trained. But there is no training for medical decision-making from an individual patient's perspective. And like you, I believe the best population health occurs when each individual gets their best decision. So population health, if you will, is the accumulative decisions of a variable group of people. One of the points I make in the book I didn't want to get into it actually, but I decided I have to. Why not just let my doc decide? And I came up with some things. And one was obviously that you, a patient, are the ones that suffer the consequences or reap the benefits of a therapy. And I talked about an inability to share the outcomes of a patient's decision. But one of the most, I think, difficult things for patients to understand is that the medicine business now runs on averages. It does a study. It finds out that on average, there's a 2% benefit. Like in the prostate cancer example, there was about an 8% chance of dying of prostate cancer over 10 years without surgery and 6% with. That's a 2% difference, right? But if you look in that average 2%, some people get bigger benefits than that and some get none. And to average it out and say, well, because it's beneficial on average, everybody should give it, that's where patients' ears should perk up and get very nervous. I tell my patients who consult with me, if you ever hear a doctor bring up standard of care, you should perk up and say, let's wait here a little bit. Am I in the standard? Am I the average? Am I different? And then once you're informed of your differences, you can make those trade-offs. And that's the only way medicine should go. And we should be restructured to make sure doctors have that time. And I think once patients get empowered to make choice, and if they would decide to make choice, you would see the profession follow them. I really think you would. I'm not trying to say that they should be responsible for improvement in healthcare, but by de facto, the consequences of them understanding the world will change. And I will give you an example. I would say I had it figured out exactly one day, but it was of 10 people that consulted me on prostate cancer decision-making, 8 of them would not take surgery. But if you look at the literature, those who go to a surgeon, almost 100% got surgery. So think about the consequences to a health policy that would be. As a health policy planner, I argue we shouldn't be talking about insurance right now until we figure out how that we're going to let the patients become decision makers. But I hope I'm not going too far astray.
Oh, no, not absolutely not. And that's
trying to give a sense.
Yeah, but it is. That's what the struggle. That's really the kind of the struggle in all this. And the other side of this is. And it's kind of one of the things when you start talking about these studies is the individuals in the study, while they can make them randomized and have this just general belief that that's your standard person. But let's just say that we know that most likely 95% of those people ate the standard American diet. And a percentage of them smoked and a percentage of them drank alcohol. And a percentage of them were in high stress jobs because they were in their 50s and 60s and trying to make their biggest dollars beforehand. And now they've got this additional stress in their lives. So you have these populations that when you look at your lifestyle, maybe the individual that comes to you is a vegan health nut that's, running so many miles doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, and has otherwise just been extremely healthy their whole life. and is quite resilient, their prognosis in a general sense, they may have been the outlier on the bell curve of that study, but there's not enough data to tell them that that's who they are. So, even though, I see the value, we're going to have to collect data for a long, long, long time and in a much smaller subsets. And I believe it's possible over time that they'll start doing that because we now have the capacity for big data. We have the capacity for AI. And so some of the lifestyle choices, some of the things that are going on around us can be segmented in things and literally start providing us that information if we start investing the dollars in helping that happen. And then as patients making decisions, because you as a practitioner have a patient that chooses not to go to surgery, and 15 years later, they're still happy as a toad running, their 70 miles a week and eating their veggie diet, but they're completely healthy.
I love that image of happy as a toad. I'm going to have to think about that one a little bit, Alan. You're raising a point that if you don't mind, I'd use to segue to the book for the listeners also, is that like we've been talking about, the first part of the book is there's very compelling reasons why patients should take over decision making. We're not talking about it here now, but there are so many conflicts of interest in medicine. And I know some of the readers in my book were shocked to see some of the things that came out of it. There's a conflict of interest around the fear of the legal consequences of maybe missing something or not following the standard of care. And all that is to the detriment of individuals. But I also realized that people are going to have to start to understand what is good medical information. And I hope I did a decent job in a short period of time. I had a friend who's an epidemiologist told me that he was going to use it in his classwork, which makes me very happy. But, some of the things that you raised are so important. For example, I give an example of how we used to think that women, when they got estrogens and supplemented estrogens as they went through menopause, that this was all good for them. And the reason we thought it was good for them is because women who were taking estrogens seemed to do better on everything. Well, then we found out that the women that were taking estrogens were also running, drinking 2 cups of wine a day, not smoking, exercising, married, had dogs, you name it. They were all, what was really going on is the people were defining the outcomes and not the intervention. And we later did better studies that I talk about in the book, and I only use for my patients, is that where we do real good clinical studies. And when we did that, suddenly estrogen not only was not a benefit, it was actually a harm. So people not only have to be empowered to choose and understand why, but they need to start to be able to understand, I think, over time, what information is worthwhile reading. And it's flabbergasting to me. There's over 20,000 biomedical journals now, Alan. And I had to come up with mechanisms of searching the literature to parse that down so it was useful for patients. And I touch on it in the book, but maybe I should have done more. But there are now ways that I can search and within minutes find the highest quality information for a patient's decision. So this is going to be available to people. And sooner or later, the people are going to say, start writing these articles so I can read them. Don't write them in hieroglyphics like scientists. Write them like people. And I think that there will be burgeoning groups of companies and even corporations that start presenting information to their patients. Because I am very impressed when patients come to me, and I only see patients who come for decisions. I do not offer a decision. I offer information and help them through the trade-off. And when they do that, they make choices against the standards of medical practice over and over again, not to their detriment at all. So I think that, the patients not only should be I'm an individualist. I am a man of the 60s, right? My father used to tell me that he'd made him mad all the time because all I'd say, why, Dad? Why, Dad? Why, Dad? And he'd say, just be quiet. But I've always believed that individuals make changes and individuals should be in control of themselves. And I think the profession needs to be reset up to assure that happens.
Yeah, I am very happy with where we're going with information today and the quality and the ability to deal with it. I recall a story back when I was in college, and I was working in a library, and this person came in and said, they had a prescription there, and they said the doctor had handed them this prescription, and they wanted to know, whether they should take it or not, because they didn't know what it was, and so I take them back to the Merrick. I don't know if you remember the Merricks manual.
Yes. Yeah.
I take them back and said, well,
how old are you, Alan?
I'm 50. I'm 50. And so, so I take them back to the Merricks manual, and I'm like, okay, this has, to my knowledge, this has every drug that your doctor would probably ever give you. And it just had all this information. It was like written for doctors, and pharmacists. And I was like, they're trying to read it. And I'm like, okay, I said, I think your best bet here is to go to the back where it says, here's all the side effects. And then, let's make a copy on the copier machine. And then you can just sit down and go through those side effects and decide, if those scare you, then you need to go have a conversation with your doctor. I'm not a doctor. I just know that, this thing has a whole page of side effects. So it is something that I would just say you have to talk to a doctor about, because I don't know anything about it. Maybe your pharmacist might know something about it, but I would talk to the doctor. So that's, it was a little bit harder back then, but at least at that point, even when they released drugs, even back in the 80s, it was a situation where, they documented that stuff. It's just now I think the opportunity to get to the data is there. And I think it's going to get better and better. I mean, we were talking before the call, as I foresee a day when your doctor comes in and tells you what the diagnosis is, and then you sit down with an artificial intelligence like Watson. We see the commercials now where people are having conversations with Watson, and he's playing on Jeopardy and things, but where we actually have a conversation with him and we tell Watson or whoever it is at that point what our concerns are relative to our lifestyles. And, you mentioned it with prostate. I think that's a great example of saying, if, impotence is a no go. I mean, we're not going to risk that. Then that's the no risk. If for a woman to say, okay, I want to understand the full nature of the risk of this estrogen causing heart disease, and then finding that, and I read this, and I had Dr. Sable on here, and he had said some studies now are showing that, if you start your estrogen too early or too late, and you're not in your little, your window of having just started menopause, then yes, that risk goes up. But there is actually a window of time within the menopause cycle that if you start the estrogen, you're actually fine. And so, again, it's just another little segment of it. Now, I know you and he could have that argument offline, but
Dang, I was going to get into it because he's wrong. That's okay.
Okay, I'm not going to go there. I'm not the doctor. I'm just saying he had data, and either way, I'm just saying, there's going to be opportunities for us to collect the data that proves one way or another what that is, at least from a law of averages. And I've worked as an auditor and accountant my whole career, so I definitely understand statistics. I understand normalized curves, and I understand how you can very easily skew data to get an ends if that's where you're going. And so we kind of talked about conflict of interest and some of these other things. And so I think it's really worth just kind of understanding that you're pulling all the data and you're weighing it as to how it reflects to the quality of your life. And you really do get into that in great detail in the book. You also provide models, actual forms for folks to go through and fill out to go through these decision models when they need to. So I encourage everyone to get this book, because at some point in your life, you are going to be facing a medical decision. And having a book like this where you can just kind of say, okay, it's mapped up. These are the benefits. These are the risks. And, this is how I kind of gauge those as important to me or not important to me. And then at least at that point, you have those tools, and then you can go ahead and use the resources and again, you provide all that information in the book as far as understanding that a randomized sample is going to be much better than one where they've pulled 30 guys out of high school and said, try this. And see how it works for you. We're in our 50s and 60s, so we're not we're not those guys that are coming out that they're studying there. So what they're doing might or might not be relevant to us, given our genetics, given our biology, given a whole lot of other myriad of facts. So kind of understanding how those studies were done, I think was really good. And you did do a great job of that. And you pointed folks to resources where they can actually get better data. And again, I'd really push on your doctor to say, okay, I want the best possible data possible. Which studies do you think reflect good information? And then, do your own research. I mean, the doctor, he or she is trying to provide you with the care. They have to abide by certain general rules of, standard of care, of worrying about you suing them. That's a daily thing for them. So the other side of all this is then say, okay, get your facts together. And I think another thing you put in there, which I thought was really good, is most of the time, these decisions are not something that you have to make on the spot.
That's very true. One of the biggest points I tried to make with these chronic care decisions, you've got to take the time. I mean, I put cases in there of men that took over 4 or 5 months before they made a decision, and that didn't hurt them at all. There's too much of a rush to decision making that is one of the barriers, I think, for people. And I hope people take that to heart, because my patients sometimes take a very long time to make a choice. And I test them. I do show how to go about a conversation. Use that word, and it's a brilliant one. You have to have a conversation. I ask the patients to provide me what they think the numbers are. I then show them the real numbers, and they're usually shocked because they almost never get it right. And I do the same thing with doctors, and I will tell you, they don't get it right. I've been practicing for 40 years. I've yet to have a doctor quote me an absolute risk reduction. I don't understand where this reluctance to these numbers and a model for helping people choice came from. But I just hope this book is a little piece of that that drives it another way.
And it is. And that's what I'm saying, that table, that chart, and the opportunity to sit down and really kind of think through the modeling of all this, I think is quite valuable. And even if you don't like math, this is the one time in your life you're going to be glad you had an algebra teacher, so you can actually sit down and do a little bit.
You can subtract, you can make medical decisions.
Yeah. But but I'm just saying, this is going to be one of those times where you realize, well, crap, I am using this stuff just a little bit, and it does matter in my life. Besides making sure I get the cheapest oranges, because I can divide. But anyway, I want to go ahead and kind of run through a model that's personal to me, if you don't mind. And just kind of say, okay, this was an event I went through, so I kind of have some history on it. But I would just say, if I come to you as a patient and I have a cholesterol number 315 and my LDL is 250, so standard of care says statins. Okay, now I, as sort of an uninformed patient at that point, not really understanding cholesterol at all. I know it a lot better now because, again, once you have a medical condition, it has an emotional tie that makes you want to learn more about it. I go ahead and I start taking the statin. And what I realize is when I'm taking the statin, I can't do what the doctor asked me to do, which was to exercise and lose weight. So, one of the orders I get, okay, you're going to take a statin, you need to lose weight, and you need to exercise. And so 2 of the things that he wanted me to do, I'm unable to do when I'm taking the statin, because it just doesn't.
So it has some personal side effects to you.
It did.
That are permanent.
Yes. And so then I go back and the doctor says, okay, well, we will put you on a different statin. Because again, we're still under the same general standard of care. I tried that one, and I was out walking my daughter. And the sad part was, before I was diagnosed, I had told a friend that I would do this endurance event with him, because actually I was only 36. So I was reasonably fit when this all started, and I wanted to get out and do this fitness run with this guy, this event. And so I was out with my daughter doing this event. We're practicing for this event. and we were on the side of the road, probably about a half a mile from my house. So it wasn't far from the house. And the muscles in my legs just quit, just completely just quit. And so I'm laying there on the side of the road with my, 5-year-old daughter, thinking she's too young for me to send the half mile home to get help. And yet here I am laying on the side of the road, through sheer will.
Scary time.
I did manage to get myself back on my feet, but I quit taking those statins, and my doctor was just sure I'd be dead in a year,
Yeah. Did he actually say that, or she?
Yeah. He's like, you have to take these statins or you're going to be dead in a year. We've got to get your cholesterol down. And he was just saying, he said, I'll be very, very happy if we could get it to 250. And he said, that's still not low enough. But what I've come to realize now, and again, it more and more data is coming out, which is good. Like I said, I'm a big fan of data. I'm a big fan of having what you need in front of you to make some basic decisions. Obviously, the science is coming around to understand that not all the LDL is the same. The fact that we calculate it might or might not be the best answer for some people. But I think that's kind of the information we're talking about to say, not everybody with a high cholesterol dies of a heart attack, and not everybody with a low cholesterol doesn't, because there are people with low cholesterol that die of heart attacks, and there are people with high cholesterol that never suffer any ill effect. So there's obviously some other elements in all of that. But and again, I'm sorry I kind of took the mic on all this, but I just really kind of wanted to put that out there where you could kind of go through today, based on the data that's available today. How would you take a patient through the decision modeling? Because I can say my model was trust the doctor. Okay, the practice is not working for me. And again, as I joked with you earlier on, was that's when I understood very clearly why they call it a practice, because you go through half the season and it's not working. So you start practicing and trying something different because that just didn't work. Patients want to leave with their care knowing that they have the highest probability of winning. And so with regards to kind of that conversation, how would you go about that with a patient today?
It's interesting you brought it up. I think it's, before I get into the process, it is a little bit of a juxtaposition with that decision to the kinds that are in my book, but not so different. So what I would do and what I would think is to start, first of all, no physician should tell you to take a statin. They don't have to take the statin. You do. So you have to know what the benefits are, and you have to know what the harms are. And the only way to do that is to compare. And the only reasonable comparisons would be to say, okay, what if I took a whole bunch of people and I put them on a statin under various conditions of cholesterol, and then I took a whole other bunch of people and I randomized them, and half got it and half didn't. And I followed them over a long period of time, and I saw what happened to them, and I would see if they were better on the statins than they were without the statins. That's the kind of comparison that would be required. So far, so good, Alan. That makes sense, right?
I guess I have a question, because I know I see this quite often in some studies, is that when the previous literature effectively said that, this was dangerous, then there was kind of an ethics issue to say that it would be almost not, I don't believe this myself personally, but it would be unethical to force a population to not take statins.
Yeah, that's that population-based decision-making, right? That's what I think is wrong with medical care. Because first of all, you couldn't force the entire population to be on statins anyway. In fact, some data I have seen, some prevalence data where they follow people who are on statins, a lot of them don't take it. And in some people who take it decided they could eat more, and they actually cholesterols went up. You have no idea how a population is going to act, and nobody even knows what the population is, Alan.
Yeah, we have to lock them up for 30 years.
Yeah, that's right. So, but to go through the process, you set the context, and cholesterol is a risk factor for untoward events in people. But here's the big point. It's not a very powerful risk factor. So what I'd get to is I'd say, so, okay, now what if I told what if you took statins for 5 years, 20 years from now, what would be the difference that you would be alive or dead? What do you think that difference would be? And when I ask people, like I did with the prostate cancer, that when I would ask them, now, how good is surgery? And they say, well, if you remove my prostate gland, I'm cured. I have a 100% chance of not dying of prostate cancer. That was in the mind of the person coming to see me, which is not true. You still have about a 6% chance of dying of prostate cancer, even if surgery is done. So you'd ask how to go through that process. So you've been through it. Do you have an idea of what the difference would be at the end of a 20-year lifespan of taking statins every day for 5-6 years?
Personally, I would guess it's close to 2%.
Yeah, it's less. So for about every 1,000 people that you put on a statin, about anywhere between 5 and 10 will not die differently. And that's not very big. In fact, the randomized trial from Scotland, it was 0.6%. Less than a 1% chance over 5 years difference in your chance of living or dying. And that's a very small amount. And that's what makes this a very difficult decision. Now, if you happen to take the pill and you want that 0.5% to 1% different chance, then you got to go to the side effect side. And a lot of people say there's not a lot of side effects, but that's not true. You've had them. I actually had a patient die of rhabdomyolysis from statin use. So it's not unheard of. There's problems with muscle aches and pains. But usually then if you have those, you go off of that until you find one in which the side effects are tolerable. So some people will discount the harm side of the decision to go to the benefit side of the decision. But it's really a trade-off. It's a trade-off of a very small benefit that you see way in the future versus a meaningful today, but small trade-off of some side effect that reduces your quality of life. And it starts when you start your statins. And that's the kind of trade-off people have to make. So it better be worth a patient a lot more to them to not die of statins than it would be to have side effects. And that's what we would work through over and over with tables to somebody to decide whether they wanted that drug or not. I will tell you, I see a lot of patients who come to decide about statins, and most often they stop them. I saw an estimate from one of my friends, he wrote it in a book, that if you were at the worst cholesterol level you could be, Alan, if you could be at the highest and the biggest risk possible, and everybody took statins, that'd save about a year of life expectancy over the population. There are a lot of other more powerful interventions for health out there than that kind of benefit.
And I would say, just walk for 15 to 30 minutes every day, and you've done more than you would do with those odds, I think.
I will tell you, I will be labeled a heretic by this comment, but I'll stick to it because I don't practice medicine for doctors. I don't practice medicine for hospitals. I don't practice medicine for the government or the insurers. I'm trying to practice medicine and push it as both as a physician and as a health policy scientist to make it better so individuals can make these kinds of choices. So that would kind of be the process. Did in a short capsuled summary, how did that flow through for you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And and I think that's really what I want to try to get here today is to help everyone understand is there's a myriad of gray in this whole decision-making process. There is some good information. There's some not so good information, but you have to assess that and kind of come up with what fits your paradigm. And again, starting out, your paradigm is probably a little skewed, which is really kind of what you show when you go through that exercise of what it was. I thought about 2%, and it was actually about a quarter of that.
Well, you're better than almost every physician I ask.
Well, I've had a bad experience, and
they've been taught that this is a very valuable thing for the future health of a group of people.
I've actually heard that there was one physician that believed we should just put statins in the drinking water.
Oh, I've heard that. I've heard that comment. See, to me, that's an anathema that says that physicians and insurers and scientists are making decisions for individuals. I like the idea of individuals. I believe an informed individual can make those trade-offs reasonably. I do not think they should make decisions based on some dichotomization of decisions like I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat. I had one man, he says, I like my surgeon so much. If he asks me to do surgery, I'll do anything. If you take my arm off, take it off. It didn't matter about benefit to them. They were so happy with their surgeon. People got to refuse to let themselves feel that way. And the examples in the back of the book, I hope, give an opportunity for people to demand a kind of conversation with their physicians that gets them to that kind of informed state of being. Now, one thing, we were bantering back and forth about the physician who said there's a window for when you should get estrogens. And I said he was wrong. And you know what? I could have been incorrect. He could be right, but here's the point. We'll never know. Why? Because that was based on observational data. We've never randomized women to get an estrogen where they are in their menopausal state. So he's responding to observational data that I will strongly claim no individual should ever accept as a decision-making tool, which puts me at odds with a lot of my scientific colleagues. And I'm on a lot of national government boards and everything else, and I adamantly oppose making decisions off bad data. And I'm trying to hope but people will get behind this, and when they become powered, we will actually get to be a better scientific community for our patients.
I completely agree with that. I deal with that all the time with my job, where I'll say, I have an observation here, but I can't extrapolate it across the population because it's not that kind of data. I can have an educated feel that it might be, but it just is what it is. And so if your cousin Betsy had a good result out of something, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have that same good result. But if 99.9% of people in a study that are around your age range and fit your demographic have a good result, now you've got something you can feel a little bit more comfortable is going to work for you. And that at least that information you're using is providing you with the good data to make the best decision possible. So again, Doctor, I really do appreciate you taking the time to do this book, because I don't know that a lot of people really think of medical decisions as something that, that they should detach themselves from emotionally and actually sit down and with a piece of paper and pen, write down the numbers and think about what each of those things means to them and weigh those decisions at that level of what they give up and what they get, because most medical decisions are not just you're cured and you're done, which it was, again, an early premise in your book. This is not about cure. Most of the time there is a trade-off. And I do respect that you're providing them with the tools that will allow us to make the right decision for ourselves, which might not be the decision someone else would make. And so, again, it was just the book was very well done in giving us the tools we need to move forward on those decisions.
I am really, I'm so happy to hear that. I wrote this for my patients. And when I first started the book, Alan, it was about 300 pages long. And then I really took the razor to it and I cut it down to 250. And I said, nobody's ever going to read this thing unless I get under 200 pages. So when I did that, I worried that I had cut too much, but maybe one of my skills has always been is that I try to get to the essence of things. And I think the book, in a very short 150 to 200 pages, I hope at least touches on the essence of most of the dilemmas that medical care, that all my kids, your kids, grandkids, all of us are going to face. We just got to be a lot better. We got to be empowered. We got to take more control over the decisions, or we'll continue to be just drummed, I think, into oblivion by the medical system as it exists today. I'm a critic, but I am not a critic of patients. That's for sure.
Okay. Well, I know you told me you're going to launch a podcast, so I'm really looking forward to that. Please let me know when you do launch it, because I do want to subscribe, and I'll make sure to share that here when that happens. But if someone wanted to get in touch with you, where would you have me send them?
Well, I'd go to my website. I'm not very good with IT, so don't laugh when people get there, but I have a website, www.drmcnutt, sharedmedchoice.com. That shared med choice is all one word. I have a blog there. I am pilot testing some information presentations for people. And I have a place where you can contact me, which comes to my email. And so there or on Twitter at McNutt, capital YCM. I went from being not tweeting once to now being a too prolific tweeter, but I will continue till somebody hopefully starts to hear. And maybe those would be the ways to go. And your comments are so supportive and so kind. I really appreciated the opportunity to talk with you.
Okay. Well, this is episode 166. So you can find those show notes, and I'll have these links in there along with his Twitter ID connection there at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/166. So again, Dr. McNutt, so much. I just really appreciate this book because it is a tool, and I love tools. I love giving people things that they can use that are going to help them live better lives. And this is definitely it, because every one of us is going to face a medical decision at some point in our lives, and whether it's for ourselves or someone we love. And so again, this is just an awesome tool to have. And I really appreciate your effort on this. Thank you.
Alan, thank you very much. I wish you were my patient. We'd probably get all our medical stuff done in 5 minutes so we can talk about weightlifting.
No, because I'm going to go slow. slow. That's one of the rules, is take your time.
Very good. Very good, Alan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think this book can help so many people. Would you share this episode with your friends and family? Thank you. Next time on the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, I give you the best bodyweight exercises for balanced fitness. Until then, have a happy and healthy day.